years of my life playing football in front of what I consider to be the best fans in college football.
The Patriot. If you followed wrestling in the 90s, you probably remember that masked hero draped in red, white, and blue. But behind the mask was a man named Del Wilkes, and his story isn't just about the cheers and boos in the ring, it is also about a terrible end. So let's take a deep dive into the rise, fall, and tragic death of the Patriot. To understand the Patriot, we have to start with the man behind the mask, Del Wilkes. Born on December 21, 1961 in Columbia, South Carolina, Del was always into sports. In fact, he was a star football player in high school and later played college football at the University of South Carolina. Del was a powerhouse on the field, and it seemed like he had a promising football career ahead of him. But life had other plans. After a short stint trying to make it in professional football, Del found himself drawn to a different kind of stage, professional wrestling. In the late 80s, wrestling was booming, and Del Wilkes saw an opportunity to bring his athleticism and charisma into the ring. His big break came in the early 90s when he joined Global Wrestling Federation, a promotion based in Texas. It was here that the Patriot was born. The character of the Patriot was pretty straightforward. He was the embodiment of American pride. He wore a mask with the American flag on it. His attire was all red, white, and blue, and his whole persona was about fighting for justice and the American way. And fans loved it. This was a time when wrestling was full of larger-than-life characters, and the Patriot fit right in. After making a name for himself in GWF, Del moved on to Japan's All Japan Pro Wrestling, where the Patriot continued to grow in popularity. Wrestling fans in Japan embraced him, and his matches were high energy and intense. Del Wilkes wasn't just a gimmick, he was an incredible athlete, and his performances showed it. By the mid-90s, Del's success caught the attention of the biggest wrestling company in the world, WWF. In 1997, the Patriot made his debut in the WWF, and he was thrust right into one of the hottest storylines of the time. He was positioned as a foil to Bret the Hitman Hart, who had turned heel and taken on an anti-American persona. Bret Hart had formed the Hart Foundation, a group that was pro-Canada and anti-USA, which made the Patriot the perfect opponent. The storyline wrote itself. The Patriot stood for everything Bret and his crew were against. They faced off at the In Your House, Ground Zero pay-per-view, and while the Patriot didn't win the WWF Championship, his feud with Bret Hart was memorable. It was a classic battle of good versus evil, America versus Canada, and fans ate it up. At this point, it seemed like Del Wilkes' wrestling career was on a high. He had a character that fans connected with. He was working for the biggest wrestling company in the world, and his matches were getting primetime attention. But unfortunately, things started to unravel just as quickly. Behind the scenes, Del Wilkes was dealing with serious injuries. Wrestling is tough on the body, and Del had sustained multiple injuries throughout his career. In particular, a torn triceps muscle was a major issue for him, and it wasn't something that could be easily fixed. Instead of taking time off to heal properly, Del did what a lot of wrestlers of his time did. He pushed through the pain. This decision would come back to haunt him. In 1998, Del Wilkes left WWF after less than a year with the company. His injuries had piled up, and his body couldn't take the punishment anymore. After years of being in the spotlight, Del was forced to step away from the thing he loved most, wrestling. But that wasn't the only battle he was facing. Like many wrestlers of his generation, Del Wilkes became addicted to painkillers. The injuries, combined with the need to stay on top, led him down a dark path. Prescription drugs became a way for him to manage the constant pain, but it quickly spiraled into an addiction that took control of his life. In interviews later in his life, Del was open about his struggles. He talked about how he would doctor shop, going to multiple doctors to get prescriptions for painkillers. At one point, he was taking 100 pills a day. He even resorted to using fake names to get more drugs. His addiction led to legal troubles, and in 2002, he was arrested for forging a prescription. It was a dark time for Del, and for a while, it seemed like the man who once embodied American heroism had lost his way. But Del Wilkes wasn't ready to give up. After hitting rock bottom, he sought help for his addiction. He entered rehab and began the long road to recovery. Faith played a big role in his healing process. And Del often spoke about how his Christian beliefs helped him turn his life around. In the years that followed, Del found a new purpose outside of wrestling. He worked various jobs, including as a car salesman, and he became a motivational speaker, sharing his story of addiction and recovery with others. He was honest about the mistakes he had made, and he hoped his story could help others avoid the same pitfalls. Del Wilkes may have left the wrestling ring, but he remained connected to the industry. He did interviews, made appearances at fan conventions, and stayed in touch with wrestling fans who still remembered the Patriot fondly. For many, he was still a symbol of hope and redemption. Sadly, Del Wilkes' story came to a tragic end on June 30th, 2021, when he passed away from a heart attack at the age of 59. His death shocked the wrestling community. Even though he had retired from the ring years earlier, Del Wilkes was still a beloved figure among fans and wrestlers alike. In the days following his death, many in the wrestling world paid tribute to Del. Former colleagues and fans shared memories of his time as the Patriot, remembering his larger-than-life persona and the excitement he brought to the ring. But they also remembered the man behind the mask, a man who struggled, who made mistakes, but who ultimately tried to make things right. The Patriot was more than just a wrestling character. He represented an era of wrestling when heroes were larger than life, when patriotism was a storyline that could fill arenas with cheering fans. But Del Wilkes' story is also a reminder of the darker side of the wrestling business. The injuries, the addiction, the toll that life in the ring can take. These are struggles that many wrestlers face, often with tragic results. In the end, Del Wilkes' legacy is one of both triumph and tragedy. He achieved success that most wrestlers dream of, but he also faced challenges that many can relate to. His story is a cautionary tale, but it's also one of redemption. Even in his darkest moments, Del never gave up, and that's something to admire. So as we look back on the life of the Patriot, let's remember the highs and the lows. He may no longer be with us, but his story and the lessons it holds will live on. That's the story of the Patriot Del Wilkes, a man who soared to great heights but also faced incredible struggles. As wrestling fans, we often cheer for the larger-than-life heroes in the ring without always knowing the real-life challenges they endure behind the scenes. Del Wilkes gave his all to entertain fans, putting his body and soul on the line. But like so many other wrestlers, he faced the consequences of that brutal lifestyle. Injuries, addiction, and personal battles became part of his story. Yet despite the fall, he sought redemption and spent the later years of his life trying to help others by sharing his struggles and the lessons he learned. What are your memories of the Patriot? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more wrestling stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.